I devoted my whole life to my son, making sure he had everything I never did. Warm meals, a good education, a place to call home. I always believed that, when I grew old, he'd show me respect. But one evening at dinner, I asked for a little more rice. Instead of a simple no, he picked up his plate and threw food at me. My entire family watched in silence. No one stood up for me. I didn't react. I just got up, walked to my room, and started planning what I would do next, which turned his world upside down. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe, and let us know in the comments where you are watching from. I always believed that family was everything. That's what I was taught growing up. And it's what I tried to pass on to my only son, Arjun. My life was never easy. Born into poverty, I learned the value of hard work before I even learned how to read. My hands were calloused by the time I was 12, carrying bricks at construction sites, sweeping floors, doing whatever it took to put food on the table. Every dollar I earned, every meal I skipped, was for my family. When Arjun was born, I made a silent promise to myself. He would never know the hunger I knew, the shame of wearing torn shoes, or the pain of being left behind. I worked double shifts, sometimes triple, just to make sure he had everything he needed. I bought him his first school uniform with money I saved by skipping lunch for a week. I remember the way his eyes lit up when I handed him his first set of books, like I'd given him the world. My wife, Mira, was my partner in every sacrifice. She stitched old clothes into new ones, stretched every rupee, and never once complained about the life we lived. We both agreed Arjun's future was worth any price. When he wanted a bicycle, I sold my father's old watch. When he dreamed of a car, I dipped into my retirement savings. Every time he reached for something, I found a way to put it in his hands. As Arjun grew, so did my pride. He was smart, charming, and ambitious. I thought I was raising a son who would honor his family, who would remember the sacrifices that built his foundation. When he got married, I paid for the wedding, even though it meant taking out a loan. When he and his wife, Priya, wanted a house, I put my name on the deed and handed over the down payment. I opened joint bank accounts, thinking it would teach him responsibility and trust. But trust is a dangerous thing in a family drama. It can be the bridge that brings you together, or the rope that hangs you when betrayal comes. I ignored the small signs. The way Arjun rolled his eyes when I told stories from my past. The way Priya sighed when I asked for help with groceries. The way my grandchildren started to mimic their father's dismissive tone. Still, I told myself it was just the stress of modern life. I believed that deep down, Arjun respected me. I believed that when the time came, he would take care of me the way I had taken care of him. I believed that blood was thicker than water. But I was wrong. So terribly wrong. I didn't know it yet, but the seeds of betrayal were already growing in my own home, waiting for the night when everything I believed about my family would be shattered in a single, humiliating moment. It was a night like any other, or so I thought. The kind of night that, in hindsight, you realize was always waiting to become a turning point in your life. The house was filled with the usual sounds. My grandchildren bickering over the TV remote, Priya clattering dishes in the kitchen, Arjun on his phone, half listening to the world around him. I sat at the dining table, quietly watching the family I had built, feeling both pride and a strange, growing distance. Dinner was simple: rice, vegetables, and a little curry. I waited, as I always did, until everyone else had served themselves. It was a habit born from years of making sure others had enough before I took my share. I watched as the bowls made their way around the table, laughter and conversation filling the air, but none of it directed at me. I was invisible, a piece of old furniture in the corner of my own home. When the bowl finally reached me, I took a modest portion. My appetite wasn't what it used to be, but that night, for some reason, I was still hungry after my first serving. I looked around the table, saw that there was still rice left, and quietly asked, "Could I have a little more, please?" The room fell silent. It was as if I had broken some unspoken rule. Arjun's face twisted with annoyance, his eyes cold and sharp. He didn't say a word at first. Instead, he reached for his glass of water, and before I could even process what was happening, he flung the contents straight into my face. The shock of cold water hit me like a slap. My shirt clung to my skin, rice ruined, dignity washed away in front of everyone I loved. For a moment, time stopped. I looked at Arjun, searching for a sign that this was some kind of cruel joke. But his expression was hard, unyielding. "That's enough," he said, his voice low and full of contempt. "Stop acting like a king in my house." Priya let out a nervous laugh, trying to lighten the mood, but her eyes were empty of sympathy. The children stared, wide-eyed, unsure if they should laugh or be afraid. No one moved to help me. No one spoke up. I sat there, humiliated, the water dripping from my face, my hands trembling, not from age, but from a rage and sorrow I had never known. I wanted to shout, to demand respect, to remind them all of the sacrifices I had made, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I wiped my face with a napkin, stood up slowly, and walked to my room. Behind me, I heard the clatter of dishes, the forced laughter, life moving on as if nothing had happened. In my room, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my reflection in the mirror. I saw a man I barely recognized, wrinkles etched deep from years of labor, eyes red from holding back tears, lips pressed tight to keep from crying out. I thought of every night I had worked late, every meal I had skipped, every dream I had set aside for Arjun's sake, and now I was nothing more than a burden, a joke, a man to be humiliated for asking for a spoonful of rice. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound I had ever suffered. It wasn't just the water, or the words, or the laughter that followed. It was the realization that the love and respect I had spent a lifetime earning could be washed away in a single careless moment. That my own son, the boy I had carried on my shoulders, the man I had trusted with everything, saw me as nothing. I lay awake that night, replaying the scene over and over in my mind. Each time the pain grew sharper, the humiliation heavier. I heard Arjun's voice echoing in my head, saw the coldness in his eyes, and felt the sting of water on my skin. I thought about confronting him, about demanding an apology, about making him see the truth. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't matter. The respect was gone. The bond was broken. As the hours passed, my sorrow turned to something else, something darker, more powerful. I realized that I had spent my entire life giving, sacrificing, believing that love would be enough to guarantee loyalty. But I was wrong. In the world of family drama, love is not always returned. Sometimes it is twisted into entitlement, and sacrifice is mistaken for weakness. That night, as the house slept and I lay in the darkness, I made a silent vow. I would not let this betrayal define me. I would not let Arjun's arrogance be the final chapter of my story. If he wanted to see what it meant to lose everything, I would show him. I would take back what was mine, and I would do it in a way he would never forget. As the first light of dawn crept through my window, I knew that the man who had walked to his room in silence the night before was gone. In his place was someone ready to fight back. And this time, I would not be the one left empty-handed. The morning after the betrayal, the house was eerily quiet. I could hear the faint sounds of Priya bustling in the kitchen, the children's laughter drifting from the living room, and Arjun's voice on the phone, already barking orders about bills and errands. It was as if nothing had happened, as if the humiliation I'd suffered at the dinner table was just another forgettable moment in their busy lives. But for me, everything had changed. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the faded photograph of my younger self holding a newborn Arjun. My hands shook, not from age, but from the storm brewing inside me. I thought about all the years I'd spent building this family, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. I remembered the nights I'd come home with aching bones and empty pockets, but a heart full of hope that my son would one day understand what it meant to be a man. But now, all I saw was a stranger in my own home. The respect I had earned through a lifetime of hard work had been washed away with a single glass of water. The love I had poured into my family had evaporated, leaving only bitterness and regret. I realized, with a clarity that cut through my grief, that I had been living in denial. I had ignored the warning signs, the dismissive glances, the mocking laughter, the way Arjun spoke about me to his friends, as if I were a burden he was forced to carry. I thought about the joint bank accounts, the house deed with my name on it, and the investments I had made for Arjun's future. I had given him access to everything, believing that trust would teach him responsibility. But all it had done was feed his arrogance. He spent freely, bragged to his friends about his wealth, and never once thanked me for the foundation I had built beneath his feet. As I sat there, the weight of my own naivety pressing down on me, something inside me snapped. I realized that I had been complicit in my own downfall. I had allowed Arjun to treat me like a servant, to mock my sacrifices, to erase my dignity one careless word at a time. I had believed that patience was a virtue, that silence was strength. But now I saw the truth. Patience had only fed his entitlement, and silence had only made me invisible. I stood up, my resolve hardening with every step. I walked to the old wooden cabinet where I kept my most important documents: bank statements, property deeds, and investment certificates. I ran my fingers over the papers, feeling the weight of every decision I had made for Arjun's sake. I realized that despite everything, I still held the power. The accounts were in my name. The house was mine. The investments were mine. Arjun had only ever been a guest in the world I had built. A surge of anger and determination flooded through me. I would not let my son's arrogance be the end of my story. I would not let him strip me of my dignity and walk away unscathed. If he wanted to see what it meant to lose everything, I would show him. I would take back what was mine, and I would do it in a way that would leave him reeling. I spent the rest of the day in silence, watching Arjun move through the house with the confidence of a man who believed he was untouchable. He laughed with his wife, played with his children, and never once looked in my direction. He had no idea that the ground beneath his feet was about to crumble. That night, as the house settled into sleep, I sat at my desk and began to make a plan. I listed every account, every asset, every piece of leverage I still held. I thought about the steps I would need to take, the people I would need to contact, and the documents I would need to move. I knew it would not be easy. I knew there would be risks, but I also knew that I had nothing left to lose. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of purpose. The pain of betrayal had been replaced by a cold, clear resolve. I would not confront Arjun with words. He would only twist them into more mockery. I would not beg for respect. He had already shown me that he had none to give. Instead, I would let my actions speak for me. I would show him that the man he thought was powerless still held all the cards. As I finished my list and tucked it away in my drawer, I felt a strange sense of peace. The decision had been made. The wheels were in motion. There was no turning back. The next morning, as I watched Arjun laugh over breakfast, I smiled to myself. He had no idea that his world was about to change forever, and that the father he thought he had broken was about to become his greatest reckoning. I spent the next few days moving through the house like a ghost, careful not to arouse suspicion. Every morning, I watched Arjun swagger through the kitchen, barking orders at Priya, boasting about his latest purchases, and complaining about the rising cost of groceries. He had no idea that the man he dismissed as a burden was quietly plotting the end of his comfort. I started by gathering every document I would need. Late at night, when the house was silent, I unlocked my old wooden cabinet and spread out the papers on my bed. Bank statements, property deeds, investment portfolios, insurance policies. I checked every detail, making sure I still had full authority over the accounts. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with anticipation. For the first time in years, I felt the power shifting back into my grasp. I made a list of the steps I needed to take. First, I would visit the bank and confirm my rights as the primary account holder. Then, I would transfer all funds into a new account under my name only. I would contact my lawyer to update the house deed, removing Arjun's name entirely. I would liquidate the investments and secure the cash in a way that only I could access. Every move had to be precise, silent, and final. But I knew I couldn't act too quickly. If Arjun sensed anything was wrong, he might try to stop me. So I played my part, keeping my routine unchanged. I ate my meals in silence, nodded politely when spoken to, and stayed out of the way. Priya barely noticed me, too busy scrolling through her phone or gossiping with her friends. The children ignored me, lost in their own world of cartoons and games. I was invisible, and that was exactly what I needed to be. The first step was the bank. I waited until Arjun left for work, and Priya took the children to school. I dressed in my best shirt, the one I had saved for special occasions, and walked to the branch where I had opened my first account decades ago. The manager recognized me immediately, greeting me with the respect I hadn't felt in my own home for years. "Mr. Sharma, how can I help you today?" he asked, his voice warm. I explained that I wanted to review my accounts and confirm the details of joint ownership. He pulled up the records, showing me that I was still the primary holder, with full authority to transfer or close the accounts at any time. Arjun's name was there, but only as a secondary user. He had no legal claim if I decided to act. Relief washed over me. I scheduled an appointment for the following afternoon to make the transfers. The manager assured me that everything would be handled discreetly. I thanked him, shaking his hand with a firmness I hadn't felt in years. Next, I called my lawyer, Mr. Desai, a man I had trusted for decades. I told him I wanted to update the house deed and ensure that all my assets were protected. He listened carefully, never asking why, only promising to prepare the necessary documents. We agreed to meet in his office the next day. Back at home, I moved with quiet purpose. I began withdrawing small amounts of cash from different branches, careful not to trigger any alarms. I sold a few pieces of jewelry I had kept hidden, converting them into funds I could carry with me. I booked a one-way ticket to a coastal town in another country, a place where no one knew my name, where I could start over without the shadow of betrayal hanging over me. Each night, I rehearsed my plan, checking and rechecking every detail. I packed a small suitcase with clothes, medicines, and the most important documents. I wrote a letter to my lawyer, instructing him to deliver a sealed envelope to Arjun after I was gone. Inside, I placed a simple note. "You threw water on my face. I drained the life you thought was yours." That was all. The hardest part was keeping up the act. Arjun continued to treat me with disdain, never suspecting that his world was about to collapse. Priya complained about bills, never realizing that the money she spent so freely was about to disappear. The children laughed and played, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath their feet. But I waited. I watched. I prepared. Every day, the tension grew, the anticipation building like a storm on the horizon. I knew that when the moment came, it would be swift and final. There would be no confrontation, no shouting, no last-minute pleas for mercy, only silence and the cold, hard truth of justice. On the eve of my departure, as I sat alone in my room, suitcase packed and documents ready, I heard Arjun laughing in the living room, boasting about his plans for the future. He had no idea that by morning, everything he believed was his would be gone, and I would be nothing more than a memory. The morning of my escape arrived with a strange, electric calm. I woke before dawn, the house still wrapped in darkness, every sound amplified by the knowledge that this was the last time I would ever walk these halls. I moved quietly, careful not to wake anyone. My suitcase was already packed, my documents and cash hidden in a secret compartment. I took one last look around my small room, the faded curtains, the old wooden chair, the photograph of a young Arjun in my arms. I felt no sadness, only a sense of finality. I slipped out of my room and down the hallway, pausing outside Arjun's door. I could hear him snoring softly, oblivious to the storm about to hit. For a moment, I wondered if I should leave a note, some final words to explain myself. But then, I remembered the cold water on my face, the laughter at the table, the years of silent disrespect. No, I thought, let him feel the emptiness, let him search for answers in the silence I leave behind. I left the house as the first light crept over the horizon, the city still half asleep. I hailed a taxi and gave the driver the address of the bank. My heart pounded in my chest, but my hands were steady. At the bank, the manager greeted me with a respectful nod, ushering me into his office. The paperwork was ready, just as we had discussed. I signed the forms, transferring every last rupee from the joint accounts into my new private account. The manager canceled Arjun's access cards, closed the old accounts, and handed me the new documents. "Is there anything else I can do for you, Mr. Sharma?" he asked. I shook my head, feeling lighter than I had in years. "No, thank you. You've done more than enough." From the bank, I went straight to my lawyer's office. Mr. Desai was waiting, the house deed and investment documents spread out on his desk. We signed everything, removing Arjun's name from every asset, every account, every piece of paper that tied him to my life's work. I handed him the sealed envelope for Arjun, my final message. He promised to deliver it at the right moment. By noon, it was done. Decades of sacrifice, years of humiliation, all erased with a few signatures and a quiet resolve. I walked out of the office a free man, the weight of my old life falling away with every step. I made my way to the airport, blending in with the crowd of travelers. I kept my head down, my heart racing as I passed through security, clutching my passport and ticket. I boarded the plane, found my seat by the window, and watched as the city I had called home for so long shrank beneath the clouds. I felt no fear, only a fierce, burning satisfaction. As the plane soared into the sky, I imagined Arjun waking up, reaching for his phone to check his balance, finding only error messages and declined transactions. I pictured him running through the house, calling my name, searching every room, his confidence crumbling with every unanswered question. I saw Priya's face as she realized the money was gone, the house no longer theirs, the future they had taken for granted slipping through their fingers. I closed my eyes and let the roar of the engines drown out the memories. I was gone. My revenge was complete. But as I landed in a new country, breathing in the salty air of a place where no one knew my name, I realized the true aftermath of my actions was only just beginning. What would become of Arjun, left with nothing but his pride and the echo of his own cruelty? The first days in my new life felt surreal, as if I were living in someone else's story. I rented a small apartment near the sea, its windows opening to the endless blue horizon. The air was thick with salt and possibility. For the first time in decades, I woke up without the weight of obligation pressing on my chest. There were no demands, no voices calling me a burden, no eyes rolling at my presence. I was alone, but I was free. I spent my mornings walking along the shoreline, letting the cold waves wash over my feet, each step a quiet act of reclaiming my dignity. I watched the sunrise, the sky painted in colors I'd never noticed before, and I realized how much of my life had been spent looking down, focused only on survival. Now I could finally look up, but freedom, I learned, is not without its ghosts. At night, as I sat in my small kitchen eating a simple meal, I would sometimes hear echoes of the past. The laughter of my grandchildren, the clatter of dishes, Arjun's voice calling out for me. I wondered what was happening in the house I'd left behind. I wondered if Arjun had finally understood the cost of his arrogance. It didn't take long for the consequences of my actions to ripple through the life I'd abandoned. Mr. Desai, my lawyer, sent me a brief message. All instructions carried out. Your son has received your letter. I imagined the scene, Arjun waking up to find his accounts empty, his cards declined, the house deed no longer in his name. I pictured his confusion turning to panic, his anger turning to desperation. Priya would demand answers, her voice sharp and accusing. The children would sense the tension, their laughter replaced by whispers and worry. Arjun would call the bank, only to be told that he had no rights, no access, no control. He would drive to Mr. Desai's office, demanding explanations, but the answer would always be the same. Your father made his decision. That is all you need to know. I could almost see him, pacing the living room, clutching the letter I had left behind. You threw water on my face. I drained the life you thought was yours. That was all. Simple words, but heavy as a stone. I wondered if he read them in anger, or if, in the quiet that followed, he finally felt the weight of what he had done. The news spread quickly among our relatives and neighbors. The man who had once boasted about his wealth and generosity was now the subject of whispers and pity. Friends who had once gathered at his table stopped answering his calls. Priya's family, who had always looked down on me, now questioned her judgment. The children, once so carefree, now watched their father with uncertain eyes. I did not rejoice in their suffering. That was never my goal. My revenge was not about causing pain, but about reclaiming my own worth. I wanted Arjun to understand that respect is not a gift, but a responsibility. That the foundation he had stood on was not his to take for granted. That a father's love, once betrayed, can become a force more powerful than any anger. In my solitude, I found peace. I read books I had never had time for, learned to cook new dishes, and made friends with the old fisherman who lived down the hall. I discovered that life, even after betrayal, can be beautiful. That justice, when it comes, is not always loud or violent. Sometimes it is the quiet act of walking away, of letting those who wronged you face the emptiness they created. I never heard from Arjun again. I do not know if he ever truly understood the lesson I tried to teach him, but I know that I am no longer the man who sat in silence at the dinner table, waiting for scraps of respect. I am the man who took back his life, who found justice in the face of betrayal, and who learned that sometimes the greatest revenge is simply to live well. As I watched the sun set over the ocean, I realized my story was not just about loss and revenge. It was about rebirth. And somewhere, far away, Arjun was left to face the ruins of his own making, haunted by the memory of the father he thought he could break. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. My new life by the sea became a gentle rhythm. Morning walks, afternoons spent reading or chatting with neighbors, evenings filled with the sound of waves crashing against the shore. I found a small community of people who, like me, had come here to escape something or start over. We shared stories over cups of strong tea, sometimes laughing, sometimes falling into thoughtful silence. None of them knew my past, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to explain myself. But the past has a way of finding you, even in the most peaceful places. Sometimes, I would see a father and son walking along the beach, their laughter carried by the wind, and a pang of regret would twist in my chest. I wondered if things could have been different, if I had set firmer boundaries, if I had demanded respect sooner, if I had taught Arjun the value of gratitude instead of shielding him from every hardship. Regret is a quiet companion, but it never truly leaves. Still, I refused to let regret define me. I had spent too many years living for others, sacrificing my own happiness for the sake of family. Now, I was learning to live for myself. I started volunteering at a local community center, helping children with their studies, sharing stories of resilience and hope. The children listened with wide eyes, their curiosity untainted by cynicism. In their laughter, I found a kind of healing I hadn't known I needed. One afternoon, as I was leaving the center, I received a letter from Mr. Desai. It was brief, but the words struck me deeply. Your son has moved out of the house. He is living in a small apartment now. He has started working again. He asked me to tell you that he is sorry. I read the letter several times, my hands trembling. For a moment, I considered writing back, reaching out, offering forgiveness. But then, I remembered the years of silence, the weight of humiliation, and I knew that some wounds take longer to heal. Forgiveness, I realized, is not always about reconciliation. Sometimes, it is about letting go of the anger that binds you to the past. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, a quiet acknowledgement of the pain we had both endured. I wished Arjun well, wherever he was, hoping that he would one day find the humility and strength to build a better life for himself and his family. As the seasons changed, so did I. The bitterness that had once consumed me faded, replaced by a quiet acceptance. I learned to cherish the small joys, a good meal, a kind word, the beauty of a sunset. I realized that justice, in the end, is not about revenge or punishment. It is about reclaiming your own worth, refusing to let others define your value. My story became a lesson, not just for me, but for anyone who has ever been betrayed by those they love. Family drama, betrayal, toxic relationships, these are wounds that cut deep, but they do not have to be the end of your story. You can choose to fight back, to reclaim your dignity, to find peace on your own terms. And so, as I watched the waves roll in, I made a promise to myself. I would live the rest of my days with courage and grace. I would not let the past dictate my future. I would be the author of my own story, a story not of defeat, but of resilience and hope. And somewhere, in a distant city, Arjun would read my words again and again, searching for forgiveness in the silence, learning, perhaps too late, that respect, once lost, is the hardest thing to reclaim. If this story moved you, or if you've ever faced betrayal in your own family, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more powerful tales of justice, revenge, and redemption. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in my place? And remember, sometimes the greatest revenge is reclaiming your own worth. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.